Welcome to A-Star Science, part of our GCSE Must Know Chemistry series. Today we're going to be talking about trends in the periodic table, an important topic. First, to understand the trends in the periodic table, we need to make sure that we understand how the periodic table, the modern periodic table, is organized. The first thing we need to understand is that going across the periodic table, we call these periods. So the horizontal rows we call periods, and going down the periodic table in the different columns, we call these groups. Now, what is a period? So for example, if we take the atom lithium, lithium has 3 electrons in total, knowing that 2 can go in the first shell and 1 can go in the second shell. So this is why lithium is in period number 2. So the number of shells is equal to the period number that is in. Groups, of course, reflect atoms or elements with similar properties to each other. So for example, we have different families which we call groups, such as the alkali metals, the alkali earth metals, the halogens. All of these different elements have different group names because they have different properties, or they have properties that are similar to each other. Now, one other basic thing that we need to understand is the group numbers going across. This particular periodic table uses Roman numerals, but it's the same thing. You have group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. 8 is sometimes called group 0. Now, the group numbers, of course, they represent the number of electrons in the outer shell, okay, of the atoms. So for example, again, if we look at lithium, which has 3 electrons in total, 1, 2 in the first shell, and 1 in the second shell, and that's why it's in group 1, okay? So here we're here to talk about the different trends in the periodic table. The first main trend that you want to be concerned about for your GCSE is the reactivity. How does reactivity change on the periodic table? So for group 1, which is the alkali metals, the reactivity increases down the group. So this is important to understand. It increases down the group. And you need to know the reason why as well. This is because the atoms get larger as you go down the group. They have more shells, and so they lose electrons easier. So this is why in group 1, the reactivity increases as you go down the group. Now, this is different for some of the other groups, so we're going to look at that now. So for group 7, it's actually the opposite. The reactivity increases up the group. And this is because the atoms get smaller as you go up the group. And so it's easier to gain electrons. And reactivity is all about losing and gaining electrons. So as you go up the group 7, it's actually easier to gain these electrons because the atoms get smaller. That means they're closer to the nucleus, the outer electrons, and it's easier to gain other electrons. Now, how about group 0 or group 8? Sometimes you'll see it called group 8, sometimes you'll see it called group 0. Remembering that group 8 means that it has 8 electrons in the outer shell, or for helium, for example, it will have 2 electrons. This helium has 2 protons and 2 electrons. This group is non-reactive or not very reactive. But for GCSE purposes, you want to say non-reactive. They're not reactive. And why? It's because they already have full outer shells. They don't need to lose or gain any more electrons, so they have full outer shells already. So these are the main trends that you need to understand in regards to reactivity. Now, there's another trend in the periodic table that you need to know for your GCSE, and this is the melting and boiling points. How does the melting and boiling point change as you go up or down the periodic table? So for group 1, as you go up the periodic table, up the group, the melting point increases. Now, this is because the atoms actually get smaller, and that makes the metallic bonding in the metals stronger. So for group 1, which are quite soft metals anyway, but as you go up the group, the melting point actually increases. Similar to reactivity, this will change for group 7. So let's have a look at group 7 and how this will vary. So for group 7, as you go down the group, the melting point gets bigger. Now, the reason why is that the atoms get larger. And these members of group 7 tend to form molecules anyway. So the molecules get larger. And they have more intermolecular forces. We're just going to use IMF. More intermolecular forces, which require more energy to overcome. And that's why as you go down the group, they actually get the melting point increases. In fact, you can see this because the fluorine is a gas at room temperature, and so is chlorine as well. Whereas bromine tends to be a liquid, and iodine is a solid at room temperature. So as we see, as we go down the group 7, the melting point increases. This is why at room temperature, the top 2 are gases, the middle one is a liquid, and the bottom one is a solid. The last trend that we want to focus on is the melting and boiling point of group 8. So group 8 also is similar to group 7. These form monoatomic because they're unreactive, so they are monoatomic. And as you go down the group, the boiling point actually increases as well. And this is because the atoms get more shells, which means they get larger. And again, that means there are going to be more intermolecular forces, which require more energy to overcome. So as you go down the group, it's worth pointing out, again, as I just mentioned, that group 8, this group here, are what we call monoatomic, meaning they form single atoms, mono meaning single, whereas group 7, this group, They are diatomic. So for example, you see chlorine, fluorine, iodine. They all have two next to their name. That's where the word di comes from. Atom meaning atom, atomic meaning atom. So made up of two atoms. There are other trends that you could learn as you get into A-level chemistry as well, but these are the main ones that you need to be concerned about for your GCSE. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you'd like me to do any specific video